Trader Merlin show. It almost feels like we should be doing a flashback show today. As you guys might remember, I did a show for almost 10 years. It was called Power Trading Radio for Online Trading Academy. And every Friday, I had a gentleman on the program. His name was the Ambassador of Opportunity. Well, at least that's the nickname that I gave him many moons ago. And I thought, you know what? I haven't had him on as frequently as I'd like to. We go way back. We're good friends. He's the one who actually got me. He signed me up at Online Trading Academy back in 1998. I think it was actually May of 1998. And he is an economist at heart. He loves talking about economics, trading, investing, gold, silver, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, you name it. Today we're going to talk about Keynesian versus Austrian economics. My guest today is none other than the Ambassador of Opportunity, Mr. John O'Donnell. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Merlin. How you doing?
Good. Good to have you here with us, man. It's been quite some time. How you been?
I've been terrific. I just got back from a miniature high school reunion. I live in Charlotte now, and I moved back. I went back to Missouri, went to Mizzou football game. They beat Louisiana Tech. Mizzou's now in the SEC. So we have a new expression I learned down here, Merlin. Whenever somebody comes on the show, I've kind of started to evolve into the Southern culture. And when we have somebody come on, we watch them on TV, they make some crazy, stupid remark that gives you a little concern. You kind of roll your eyes. What happens down here when someone does that? They say something like, I don't think his cornbread's done in the middle.
I think he's a few shrimp short of a seafood platter.
There you go.
I like that. Good.
I'm doing good. I'm fine. I'm kind of retired, living the dream of retirement. And let me tell all your listeners, you better get ready and do some pre-planning for retirement, because retirement's not a walk in the park. All things considered.
It's funny, we have this portrayal that it is, John. It always feels like, oh, retirement, the golden years. It's like, well, those are the years that I'm sore and achy. I can't walk very far, and I'm supposed to be playing golf all day. And with what income? But let's talk more at length as we go about retirement. Maybe we can get your first-hand personal stake on that one. But I want to get to the topic at hand, because I know I don't want to get accused for clickbait, which a lot of people will say, well, you had that topic up there. Let's talk about Keynesian versus Austrian economics. First off, let's break apart the two schools of thought and what they mean to you. Now, try to be objective. I know you're very biased towards one side, but we are in the United States in a Keynesian system, so explain what that means.
Well, let me talk about how it was introduced in my life. Like the rest of us, I went to a university. I took an economics course. I wasn't an economics major. I happened to be a biology and chemistry major. But one of the prerequisites to get a degree was you had to take Introduction to Economics. And Paul Samuelson's textbook, probably all of us read, is the #1 selling economics textbook in the world. And I went to college in the 1960s. And of course, Samuelson was talking about how the Russian economy was far superior as a Keynesian system, with all their ability to create economic aggregates and analyze various sectors, and they had great productivity. And he forecasted in the 1960s in college textbooks, Merlin, that because of the Keynesian economic system that became popular with John Maynard Keynes after World War II specifically, that the Russians' economy was going to grow much faster than the American economy, and it's going to swamp the American economy and leave us in the dust.
That's a good one. That's almost like an intro line for a stand-up comedian, but okay, I'll go with it.
But they did not take this out of his book until after the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. So the academia wallows and lives in the Keynesian fog, as I was concerned. I was lucky in 1970. I read a book by Harry Brown called How to Profit from the Coming Devaluation. It was a little $1.25 paperback book. Silver was $2 an ounce. Gold was about $45. About $35. And the book forecasted that the dollar was going to be devalued by Nixon, that we'd spend a lot of money on deficit programs and social programs, and that the dollar was going to have to be devalued. And that the book forecasted that within the next decade, I remember this is 1970, that by 1980, the price of gold would double and the price of silver would triple. And the book's advocacy was, you need to get out of fiat dollars. The whole book was based on Austrian economic principles. And it led me in the back of the book to future readings by a guy by the name of Dr. Murray Rothbard that ultimately became my mentor, my shining light for economic wisdom, and introduced me to the principles of Austrian economics that had been developed by Karl Menger at the University of Vienna in about 1871. And his number one leading student, well, top student, maybe not number one of his top three students was Ludwig von Mises. And Mises went on to write a book that became quite popular called Human Action. And the difference between Austrian economics and Keynesian economics, if one were to take the time to invest and just understand the critical difference between the two, is that one is an advocate. Keynesians advocate for more government intervention into your life. They advocate for the government to control the monetary systems. The Austrians believe that if I were to define economics today, I would define it as the study of human action. And I would define human action as purposeful behavior.
Okay.
Now, all economic transactions, whether you're a producer or a consumer, are based on your human action, the human action of both actors. And the Keynesians don't believe really in free markets. They believe in markets have failures and that there needs to be more and more aggressive government intervention in every market that comes along. They believe in the heavy hand of government regulation. The Austrians believe in the light touch. The Austrians aren't anarchists. They believe in the light touch, the light heavy hand of government intervention into the marketplace.
Yeah, and along with that, I think that when you look at the current system, you said that the Keynesians don't really believe in free markets. Well, I think they do to an extent of, okay, we'll let things function as they do as long as they function the way that we want them to function, right? So if the path is going the way we want it, then we'll leave our hands off. But we're certainly going to implement policy and action and changes to make sure that the path that this economy is going or whatever direction we want to go is going to be that way. And if it doesn't, then we throw in the heavy hand and make it go that way. Just like we're seeing with interest rates and quantitative easing and quantitative tightening and all sorts of stimulus packages, right?
Well, the problem is this. They may have that desire, but the problem is if you look at their track record, which the best case history of massive intervention into the marketplace by the Fed, and the Austrians are always pointing their finger at the Fed.
Of course,
is the Great Depression. Now, Murray Rothbard has written the greatest book ever published on the history of the Great Depression from an Austrian economic perspective as to what the Fed did through their intervention that exacerbated, lengthened the Great Depression. And it wasn't the Fed's deficit spending that got us out of the Great Depression.
What was that book? Was that What Has the Government Done to Our Money?
No, that book is America's Great Depression by Dr. Murray Rothbard. It's a great read which is totally against what the Keynesians wrote as their cause and effect and move out of the era of the Great Depression. So I'd recommend everybody read a couple of books. One, read the book, What Has Government Done to Our Money? You can get it at Amazon. You can get it at Mises.org.
Hold on, John. You can get it, everybody, you can get it in the chat. I've put What Has the Government Done to Our Money in the chat. I have put America's Great Depression in the chat, as well as Human Action in the chat. So you guys have all three of those books right there.
Those three. No, don't start with Human Action. Human Action is encyclopedic in scope. It was written by Mises as an Austrian, and it's pretty dense. Now, if you've only got one read this book. Murray Rothbard wrote a book that took human action and Americanized it. And the title of that book is by Murray Rothbard called Man, Economy, and State. And this book takes all of Mises' principles and writes them in a style for the layman to comprehend and give you a tremendous education. As a matter of fact, if you'll study Man, Economy, and State, you will probably know more than an individual that has a master's degree in Keynesian economics.
Well, I just put that one in the chat too. So all four of those books you've mentioned are for free. They're in the chat. And by the way, before we go any further, I'd be remiss if I didn't say you should all, if you are interested in this discussion, you should all check out Mises Institute. If you go to Mises.org, there's a tremendous amount of information. All of those books that I just sent you direct links to in the chat are available at Mises, and all of the ones I sent you are free. There's even audiobooks for some of those versions, so definitely check it out. They do an amazing job at helping spread the word and understanding of Austrian economics.
They do, and they have a bunch of free webinars. If you're an economics major at a university now and you're kind of up to your ears in Keynesian economic balderdash, you can go to the Mises Institute and you can get a master's degree in Austrian economics issued by the Mises Institute. And because they are the depository of Austrian economic wisdom. They publish every day. They're very, very powerful, and there's some tremendous books there for beginners, and they're all free. The majority of them are free, not all of them, but it's a tremendous resource that everyone should. I visit it every day. I'm amazed at the volume of content, multimedia content they're able to put out. And it was started by a man by the name of Lou Rockwell and Murray Rothbard. It's located in Auburn, Alabama. They got some seed help, I believe, early in their start from Auburn University, I believe, and they're right across the street from the entrance to Auburn University. It's a great, great free market. And by the way, they don't take a nickel's worth of government money. They don't get a nickel's worth of government money. They're hardcore Austrian economic principles, leaning in the favor of being libertarians. They are also champions in their own style for Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Not the whole cryptocurrency space, but for Bitcoin.
Well, I think just having a decentralized monetary system that is not controlled by any one person goes right in with the laissez-faire type of approach that I think the Austrian school really represents. If we look at the spectrum of, let's just say, the four main schools of economic thought, on one side, you have absolute government control. That would be your Marxist type of system, and that's obviously the extreme. As we move a little bit further to the right, you've got government intervention, some government intervention, or a lot of it, but at least not total control, and that would be the Keynesian economic system, which we're in. There's the Chicago school, which would say limited government, right, really getting down to the minimum, and then you have the Austrian school, which says hands off, let the markets do what they need to do. They're the ultimate determination. Would that be a good assessment of that spectrum of four?
That's a very good summary.
Okay.
And don't get hung up. The other three schools, other than the Austrians, are hung up on building these big economic models on a computer with hundreds of variables and factors, making various assumptions, looking at the data. The Austrians are all about analyzing human action. Matter of fact, the Austrians make very few economic forecasts, although Mises was on record with identifying the coming Great Depression in the 1930s. Another great book to read is Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. This is the #1 selling popular economics book in the world.
Wow.
It's been around since 1946. Henry Hazlitt was a financial analyst, a writer, journalist for the New York Times. He read Human Action, fell in love with the work of Mises. He sponsored Mises. The Nazis hated Mises so much that they ran him out of Austria, and he had to flee to Switzerland, he and his wife. And he struggled, as you can imagine, during that period of time because Mises was Jewish, Jewish intellectual par excellence, probably the leading Jewish intellectual in economic wisdom throughout Europe at that time. And so remember, the Austrian school was a predecessor of economic wisdom in academia in Europe from the 1870s. Keynesians really didn't get rocking and rolling until John Maynard Keynes come along with the Bretton Woods Agreement. That's where all that. The Austrians have always been staunch advocates, not only for the gold standard, but they were champions for the silver standard as well when our currency was back. What this book, What is Government, did for me, it got me involved in silver at $2 an ounce. Owning gold and silver coins got me involved in gold at about, I guess, it was maybe $40 an ounce by the time. And it kept me in it for 40 years. I mean, the principles, they were accurate because then all the central banks of the world that are run by Keynesians, and somebody told me that the Fed has 1,700 PhD economists on their staff, and they're 100% Keynesian.
Wow, I don't buy that, John. I'm anti-Fed. I'm an abolish the Fed kind of person, but I can't imagine that not one person has some Austrian belief systems in them.
Well, remember, there aren't hardly any PhD programs in economics in academia in America today that teach even an introduction to Austrian economic principles. Now, if you have a bright student who's intellectually curious, he might run into the Mises Institute, but he's going to learn Austrian economics through self-study. He's going to be a motivated learner that is going to read the right books, do his own analysis, and make his own decision as to. It's not like you could go to the University of Southern California or the University of UCLA and say, do you have a position for an Austrian economist to teach Austrian economics in our fine economics department? And the answer is no, none of them do. Right. You can't find that at Harvard. It's insane because they're so consumed with their bias that they can't embrace any Austrian principles.
Crazy stuff. Question from Naum. Naum says, what does John think about all this government control over the monetary systems? Obviously, we are in unprecedented times. I just scratched my head for the past few years just wondering what in the hell is going on with, this massive printing of money and all of a sudden all this different intervention. I'd love to get your take on, I guess to answer Naum's question, what's your take about all this?
Well, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I think Murray Rothbard and Ludwig Mises and Hayek and Hazlitt are probably rolling over in their grave today. If you would have told them in a short window of time, the Fed would have blown up their balance sheet to over $9 trillion. And it went from, if you remember, Merlin, when you and I were talking about this on the Power Trading Radio show, the Fed's balance sheet was at less than 900 billion.
Right. But John, ever since, you could look at what happened in 2020, and I've got the chart up here for everybody at home. You could, this blue line that I have moving up diagonally, it's even bigger than that if I go to the dead lows down here. The market's up 120 or shot up 120%. So you could make I'm sure that somebody who's new to economics would be like, well, screw whether it's Austrian or Keynesian, they pop this market up 120%. Yay, everything is great.
Well, yes, and where did they take where did they take the price of gasoline? And where did they take taxation? And where did they take the indexation of when you have all this Keynesian money floating around and you index the your income taxes, and the whole tax rates get indexed. When you look at the single family home that's gone through the roof, yes, it's been a good hedge against inflation, because the government can print money faster than builders can build homes. But how many people can today afford a single family home, specifically in Southern California? And then what happens to interest rates? Well, you have a long period of time where interest rates go from mortgages at 12%. I ended up getting my mortgage at 2.5%. And now we got mortgages back up today at 6%. So we have this wild, because of government intervention into the marketplaces. And let's not forget what's happened to the price of oil, the price of gasoline. Let's not forget about what's happened to the price of labor. I mean, when you run it, or you wash it all through the economy, it sounds good on the surface until you discover that, Merlin, I just saw the statistic the other day, half the American population of the world live on less than the amount of electricity you use to run your refrigerator on an annual basis. So the wealth has not been there. The equality gap has skyrocketed under the principles of Austrian economics.
Yeah.
What would the world look like if we had stayed on a gold standard? Your assumption is that a currency backed by gold or silver during that same window of time would have not allowed our equity capital markets to perform perhaps even better. I can tell you, if you take the period of time to study a little bit of economic history that's brought out in Rothbard's writings, you will discover the greatest percent economic growth our country ever experienced, looking at all of the various economic periods we've gone through, was during the periods when we were on a gold standard. So, when we went off the gold standard, that's when what hit the fan. And as far as I'm concerned,
well, didn't it all? I mean, it really, if I remember all my research, and I am not a big reader, so I have not read some of the Rothbard stuff, but, really, you go to 1913 with the creation of the Fed, and that's when things really started to decline. And then, of course, going off the gold standard, that was an extra catalyst. You have this whole sequence of events, starting with 1913, that really was the problem.
Well, with the Bretton Woods Agreement, remember, the gold standard was radically changed with the Bretton Woods Agreement right after World War II.
Right.
And the central bank, London went off the gold standard. All the central banks, Europe was destroyed. They had no productive capacity whatsoever. Japan was destroyed, and so whatever the world went on to, what Keynes had everybody go to, was the dollar standard. But they made the promise, Merlin, to all those central banks that the dollar would be convertible to gold at I believe it was $35 an ounce. Okay. Or no, excuse me. It was $22.22 an ounce. Then a little bit of time went by, and Roosevelt devalued the dollar to $35 an ounce. And
then Nixon, what year was that?
Well, when we went on the Bretton Woods Agreement, look up the Bretton Woods Agreement. So the U.S. government has a history of reneging on its promises. Now, you have to ask yourself the question, what caused Nixon to close the gold window? We had been fighting, specifically, lots of deficit spending, including the Vietnam War. And the Prime Minister of France, I believe it was de Gaulle at the time, decided that he did not believe that there was enough gold, that America had in custodianship enough gold to live up to promise to make their dollars that they had accumulated in trade convertible into gold at $35 an ounce. So he sent his warships over to America to pick up his gold. Nixon was forced to call the gold window because, well, he got his bluff called. And lo and behold, we have some gold in Fort Knox, Merlin, but there is no standing audit. There's never been an independent audit of how much gold really is in Fort Knox, who really owns it, has it been hypothecated? And we really don't know. And no one in our Congress or Senate seems to have the cojones to want to stand up and say, well, why don't we go knock on that door over there and see if that cornbread is done in the middle?
Don't ask questions you don't want answers to, John.
Well, maybe you don't want an answer, but I'd like an answer for my grandchildren. Okay, and this is why I'm an unabashed bull, ultimately on what Bitcoin is going to become, and I want to recommend, for whatever it's worth, that anybody who's listened to your show, if they don't have 1 to 5% of their liquid investable funds in Bitcoin at this price south of 19,000 a unit, they're making a big mistake. They need to go read Rothbard's book, What Has Government Done to Our Money? Rothbard's book, for all practical purpose, forecasted that we would have an independent monetary system, that ultimately the fiat currency system would collapse under its own weight, as, by the way, most of them have. If you take and by the way, I was looking at some numbers the other day with the dollar index up about 20%. If we were to price Bitcoin in yen, euros, Swiss francs, pound sterling, Bitcoin is still doing quite well when you look at all the fiat currencies in the world that are having a different conversion ratio than you and I stare at every day. And if you want to see how many lira it takes in Turkey to buy a Bitcoin, I mean, it's over the top.
We could always look at it. I want to go back to a statement you mentioned just a little bit ago, saying, this Fort Knox thing. And I've heard the term Fort Knox, the name Fort Knox, since I was a little kid. And I think everybody does. Oh, it's just Fort Knox. It's where all the gold is at. I'm going to throw a hypothetical at you. You're watching the news. Remember when Al Capone, or not Al Capone, what was his name?
Geraldo.
Geraldo opened Al Capone's vault. You remember that show?
Yeah.
I remember I was glued to that TV with my parents. We had family and friends over watching that show. It was such a letdown. What's that?
Big ratings.
Huge ratings. I mean, everyone wanted it was so entertaining. So let's just hypothesize and say that next year on, August 31st, they're going to do a live streaming view of the opening of Fort Knox so we can witness what's in there. And they open the doors. It's 3 hours of pageantry just drawing into this stupid show. And they open that door, and there's nothing in that building whatsoever. What's your reaction? Told you so.
I'm going to go buy some more Bitcoin. I'm going to get hyper long gold. I'm going to buy some more Bitcoin. I mean, come on.
Well, then, see, would you go hyper long gold? Because I think automatically what that tells you is that the gold holdings are a lie. And part of the reason that people buy gold is, central banks hold it. And if there's nothing there, then wait a minute, this has all been one big lie.
Well, but remember, our currency is supposed to be. Remember, there's a lot of central banks in the world, including in the Middle East, that still take our dollar. And I mean, what do you think is going to happen to all those people that own bonds that are denominated in U.S. dollars in Japan, in China, the Middle East? Remember, Nixon cut a deal with the Middle East to take our dollar, which again was going to be backed by a certain amount of gold. By the way, during the Great Depression, it's not like there was 100% convertibility. Even at the height of the gold standard in America, there was only about 25% reserve status. Is all there really was, because it's the old story. Not everybody's you're not gonna have a run on the bank overnight. But I would certainly want to be long Bitcoin. No matter what. But here's the other thing, Merlin. What if they opened up the bank vault, the gold was there, and they drilled a couple of bars, and they assayed out? But the real question is, has the gold been hypothecated? I mean, has the gold been put up for collateral somewhere else? We don't know. We don't know what we don't know.
Right. Given the fractional reserve nature of our markets and our banking system, it would be no surprise to hear or find out that gold was in fact collateralized for something else as a hedge.
Well, let's face it. You're facing what happens at a commodity exchange. What happens with all the gold that's supposed to be in custodianship at Chicago Merc? What happens with the bullion dealers? J.P. Morgan Chase, the bullion dealers in London. How many times they are using that gold as collateral for futures forward positions? Yep. Where they are the counterparty to the trade. there's plenty of paper gold in the world. The world will never run out of paper gold because there aren't a finite amount of units. That's the reason I was attracted to Bitcoin. There's only 21 million units. And if I listen to some of your data, which I do on occasion, maybe 20% of it has disappeared, or the keys have been lost, or
Oh yeah, with Bitcoin, yep.
I liked your show where you had the world GDP divided by 21 million units. I like that. I like that. I like that concept.
You like everything divided by something. You love gold is the metric. That's a great website you use too. What's that site? It's pricedingold.com.
Yeah, pricedingold.com. Where now what I want you and I should do is copy pricedingold.com.
Priced in Bitcoin.
price everything in Bitcoin units, fractional Bitcoin units, and that to me is a better economic indicator than a consumer price index, which we all know is a fraud.
I'm bringing it up here. I think you might be onto something. We could do a pricedinbitcoin.com. Interesting.
Or priced in ETH. We got a couple of them in there. Maybe take 5 of them, and we'll have a little website, and we'll do that right column there with all those asset categories, and they're all going to be we can price most of them in fractional units.
Yep.
And like the one on gold, they even get down to micrograms and are in kilograms of gold. How many kilograms of gold does it take to buy a home? How many Bitcoins does it take to buy a home in Charlotte? And how many Bitcoins does it take to buy a home in Costa Mesa of X quality points?
I get it. You're going to do a lot better on Charlotte. Hey, rub it in, John. Rub it in. I get it. Let's look at some other hypotheticals here. Let's look at number one, since Mike just mentioned this one. If America wanted to go back to the gold standard, could we buy a gold producer like 3M and just keep the gold? And yes, it would be expensive, but let's talk about the possibilities of going back to the gold standard. What does it mean? How do we get there?
Well, you and I interviewed on Power Trading Radio an Austrian economist that taught banking. He teaches economics at the University of Wisconsin Banking School. And you and I had him on the show several times. His name slips me at this moment, but he did a complete analysis on this. And if we were to figure out what the price of gold would need to be even 50% convertible, but again, you don't need 50% convertibility. Again, at the peak of the gold standard, we only had about 25% reserves, but at 50%, it was like $35,000 an ounce. Gold would have to go from where it's at today, $1,700 an ounce, to $35,000 an ounce. That's not unrealistic at all. Silver should probably, if we were to go back on a silver standard, what if we were to go back and make our coinage 900 fine silver, like with dimes, quarters, and halves? You'd probably have $100, maybe even $200 silver an ounce in fiat. One of the greatest measurements, Merlin, is I do this all the time when I meet with kids on the street, and I always carry with me 2 Kennedy half dollars minted pre-1964 for a face value of $1. And if I were to melt those coins, they have 0.72 ounces of silver. If you take silver at $18 an ounce times 0.72, I think that comes almost to $13 in fiat money for 2 half dollars. You with me?
Yep.
Now remember, these half dollars were minted by the U.S. government. Then I take a fiat dollar, okay, and I compare the two. How many gallons of gasoline, or fractions of a gallon of gasoline, can I purchase with 1 fiat dollar minted by the government? And how many gallons of gasoline can I purchase with 2 Kennedy half dollars? And this is a real vivid example that this book, How to Profit from the Coming Devaluation, gave me back in the very early 1970s, which is don't trust the paper money. and they bring up a law that's called Gresham's Law. And Thomas Gresham was an economist in the 1500s. And he wrote a law that said bad money drives out of circulation good money. When you have two competing currencies circulating where one is questionable in credibility, like a fiat note from a central bank, and you have another one that has credibility of having a fixed supply, like a Bitcoin, Bitcoin is considered the good money. The bad money, which is highly susceptible to dilution by the government and the central banking system, is the bad money. So the bad money will drive out of circulation the good money. And that's why I believe, not in my lifetime, but I believe in my grandchildren's lifetime, that Bitcoin will trade north of $1 billion a unit.
John,
that's the good.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, let me finish.
Okay.
The good news. The bad news is a cup of coffee at Starbucks will cost you $704 a cup.
Well, I mean, that's just inflation. It's going to happen one way or another. In that, oh man, I had a great retort to that one, it slips on my mind right now. All right, so going back to the gold standard, I don't think that's going to happen. The other one that I think is interesting discussion is there's talk about the U.S. dollar losing its reserve currency status. And you're hearing more and more stories about Japan and China, who are the two of the largest bondholders of the United States, unwinding their balance sheets. You're hearing issues about Middle East countries saying, hey, we would like to have a different currency to price oil in. Since we're the ones pulling most of it out of the ground, we want to price it in our own currency and maybe create a different currency for it. So on a scale of 0, never on earth going to happen, and 100%, it's absolutely going to happen. What are your thoughts on the U.S. losing its reserve currency status? And if you think it can, what replaces it? And how does it all fall out?
Well, that's the key question. What are you going to replace it with? In order for the dollar to no longer be used as the premier reserve currency of the world. And by the way, is it possible it could lose that status? Absolutely, it's possible. Remember, the British pound used to be the reserve currency of this world. They lost their status, okay? And it was transferred over to the US dollar. So is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Now, but the real question is, the only thing you could possibly back it with would be probably a basket of currencies, some kind of a currency unit. I don't think the central banks of the world want to give up their monopoly to deficit spend and print money and create monetary units out of thin air. That's a wonderful monopoly to have. So I don't believe it'll happen in my lifetime. I don't think something like, unless we were to have a vicious world war, we still have to have voluntary exchange. We still have to have producers produce the goods and services we need for a modern lifestyle. Most of that's going to center around energy. You still have to make settlement. A consumer, a buyer, and a seller still have to make settlement. You have to make settlement in a currency unit that you have confidence in, that will be a store of value, a unit of exchange, a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a store of what's the other one? Store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. We still have to do accounting. So, you have to have some unit. Will it be Bitcoin? I don't know. I would believe that a basket of currencies that has, a component of Bitcoin in it probably be a pretty good idea. I don't know for sure, but for what it's worth, I don't think it's going to happen. Certainly in my lifetime, it could happen in your lifetime.
I think it'll happen in your lifetime, John. If you look at the history of reserve currencies, France had one from 1720 to 1815. So theirs was 95 years, and then the UK had one from 1815 to 1920, so it was 105 years, and we currently have had it from 1921 on through now. So here we are at 101 years. There is a pattern. Before that, it was about a 100-year cycle. I do think it'll happen. I just don't know which way it's going to go. I mean, I would love it to be something that's a decentralized, something like Bitcoin. Of course, Bitcoin doesn't have the transactional speed that we need. However, you can use layer 2 technologies. But, maybe it's some other one that's decentralized. I think that's the key, is every reserve currency in the world has been a centralized currency in the past. It's been controlled by a group or an entity. I think the future holds a global currency that's not controlled by anybody, and that changes everything. I think one of the comments I loved was, if we did not have fiat currency, we wouldn't have wars. We have wars because we have fiat currency, because it's the ability to just keep printing money out of nothing and say, yeah, I'll pay you back later. I mean, this makes Wimpy from Popeye look like an absolute genius. I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Yeah, but it's all based on confidence.
Yes.
And look at Turkey. Look at Zimbabwe. Look at Venezuela. Look at most of the monetary systems they have in Africa. It's all based on confidence. I mean, when you've got 40% a month inflation, I remember an Online Trading Academy. We had several employees there at Online Trading Academy that lived and grew up in Israel. Do you remember that? Israel, I remember the guy we had there that was doing the accounting, had the accounting department. And I asked him, he lived in Israel during the time of the runaway inflation they had with the Israeli currency and the shekel. And I said, what was it like? What was it like to live? He said, well, first of all, the published rate of inflation was at about 20% per annum was what the government told us the inflation rate was. He said that was ridiculous, because every day when we went to the supermarket, they would change the prices on the goods on the shelves every 3 times. They changed the prices 3 times a day. He said, we knew, and obviously the merchants of that food had their input costs going through the roof. Obviously inflation was a lot more than 20%, but the government kept lying to us. And finally the whole system collapsed. So when people totally lose, and this is what happened with the Weimar Republic in 1921, there's that famous picture of a man with a wheelbarrow full of money, and he's the manager of a factory in Germany, and he takes a wheelbarrow. They paid the workers twice a day, and he takes a wheelbarrow full of money to the gate. The worker's wife meets the guy there, gets the wheelbarrow full of money, immediately goes to the grocery store, and buys that wheelbarrow full of paper notes. Will buy a loaf of bread. Well, this is where you have complete loss of confidence in the currency system. And somebody used to say, yeah, and if you left the wheelbarrow outside, it would probably be stolen.
Right. The wheelbarrow is the most expensive part of it.
Correct. Well, it had tangible value because it had utility to move, goods. But, I used to do a lecture in those little talks I would do for Online Trading Academy, where if you go into Google and do a search on hyperinflation, currencies that have become worthless, you will discover there are hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of currency systems where there's been complete lack of confidence and the currencies have failed. Mm-hmm. It's happened in Russia. It happened in China. It's happened all over the world.
Well, I think that the truth of the matter is I don't know of one fiat currency throughout history that has survived the test of time. I think that's the real rub. And we all live in a fiat currency system. So here we are kind of slandering the fiat system, but it is what it is. We are a part of it. I think that, looking forward, I do think that in the next maybe decade, we will see U.S. lose its reserve currency status, and then where does it go? How do you protect against things like that? And I think John's right. I think you start looking at precious metals, gold, silver. Bitcoin would certainly be in my holdings. I do hold all 3 of those, by the way. I have gold, silver, and plenty of Bitcoin at this moment. It's about protecting yourself when these events happen and being more proactive than reactive to those events.
Remember, if we were into a period of like they have in Turkey, where you've got 40% inflation, or like we got in Venezuela, where you have 300% per annum inflation, or Zimbabwe, where I think I showed you one time. I have a $10 trillion Bank of Zimbabwe banknote, and some lady gave it to me. She said, I'd like to go to your school. I said, great. What? I don't know anything about the Zimbabwe exchange rate. What will this buy me in Zimbabwe, this $10 trillion note? She said, it'll buy you a chicken. I said, you mean like a Kentucky Fried Chicken dinner? She said, no, like a chicken, but you got to catch it.
Love that one. You got to catch that chicken. Yeah, I was actually bringing up some different charts for you as we speak to use as support here. Here's the Zimbabwe inflation chart. Now, unfortunately, that goes back to 2008, but you can see the 1 quadrillion % inflation. Unbelievable.
I'll send you a table. I have a table in 1920. What was it? In 1919, the exchange rate of the German Reichsmark was 4 Reichsmarks to the dollar. Okay, that means a Reichsmark was worth what? About 25 cents. That was the exchange rate in 1919. In January 1919, by the December of 1921, you know what the exchange rate was, Merlin?
December of 1921. I'm stalling here so I can bring up the chart for us, but
you know what? The Reichsmark.
Yeah.
You know what the exchange rate was?
In 1921, I'm going to say it peaked at probably about 100.
Yeah, it was 15 trillion Reichsmarks to the dollar.
There you go. I got the chart up here. Yeah, it's a ridiculous surge. But, and this is the danger of fiat money. The governments will keep on printing. And this is why, I've shown the chart many times of the M1 money supply in the U.S. And all I can think, John, is I keep going back to that chart that you have there of the Weimar Republic. Yeah, I feel like a terrible parallel where we're just printing so much money. Now, of course, we're doing quantitative tightening now, removing some of that money supply, and we can see it diminishing. But, we were on path to be no different than they were, right? Just keep on inflating. And then here's the outstanding part is they're all scratching their heads going, wow, we thought inflation was transient. What on earth happened? It's like, how do you not know? Even if you're a Keynesian economist. I mean, I studied Keynesian economics in college. And one of the main things my professor kept hammering on, he says, when you increase the money supply dramatically, that will increase inflation. It's like, well, hold on a second. I've got the perfect recipe that the Fed has been doing for the past few years, and they don't believe it's ever going to lead to inflation. It just blows my mind.
Well, it's remember, in any economic system, at any given moment in time, there are components of an economy that are struggling, and they're going through, in fact, deflation. And then there's other parts of the economy that have an abundant financing available to it, and it's going through a boom. Mm-hmm. So at any moment in time, an impact of massive increase or contraction of the currency and liquidity, and it's all driven on credit. I mean, the whole system is a credit system. And as we learned in the 2009 era, credit systems can collapse. And there can be a bailout, but the real question is how long can you put that Band-Aid on that giant sucking chest wound?
Yeah, not long enough apparently. Well, we can keep going here, but I'm. It's really. How hot is it over there? Are you heated up? You got some heat waves like we do here?
Oh, not like you. I mean, today you can. I don't know, probably 85 here today. But what is different is that we got terrible humidity.
Yeah, you got bugs the size of pterodactyls, man. I don't forget that thing.
Well, not as bad as you'd think, but we don't have what you're going through out there. And by the way, Merlin, we do have water.
Oh,
ouch. We have plenty of water out here.
That was a cheap shot, but I do have a little glassware. This is it. I have to ration this for 3 weeks.
And let me tell you, North Carolina has a lot of nuclear power too, baby. Nice, clean energy. I love.
That's great. Let's talk about 3 Mile Island real quick. So,
I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about you guys. I'm worried about you guys closing your nuclear plants. Is what I'm worried.
I know they shut down the what was that one? Not San Juan Capistrano. San Clemente. What is that one that's down there? Looks like the two.
Yeah, they call it the May West. They call it the May West.
The May West. I'll leave that one alone. Well, hey, John, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Maybe I can bug you to come on once a month. I know you're retired now. Maybe next show. Let's do the next show. A first-hand view of retirement with John O'Donnell.
All right.
You going to show us pictures of you golfing?
No. But I still got a mean jump shot, Merlin. I still can. I still can put the ball on the floor.
You've always been a basketball person. You know me,
Well,
I'm terrible at it.
Let me tell you what happened on my trip. One of my high school classmates brought his scrapbook, and I had a pretty busy high school athletic career, and he brought all the clippings from our high school era. We went through second grade through high school together, and I had forgotten a lot of the facts. And boy, so he lent me the high school scrapbook, and I'm now reliving the 1960s. And as my wife says, "Oh my God, you're still a legend in your own mind."
Wow, reliving the 1960s. Well, if you want me to send you some good weed, I live out here in California. I know we got you beat there.
That's what my son said. I said, "You better." My son said, I told him I got exposed to a little bit of weed, and he said, "Dad, your weed was so weak in the 1960s. You ought to see what we kids are smoking today."
You don't, man. Some of them should be debilitated. All right, John. Well, I'm going to try to get you on next month. We'll continue on our conversation. Maybe not be every Friday, but maybe we can get you on once a month. Love having you on. Good to see you, my friend. I'm glad to see you're doing well. And say hi to little lady for me, and I'll see you again soon.
Peace. Buy Bitcoin.
All right, guys, that was the Ambassador of Opportunity, John O'Donnell, giving us some insights into Keynesians versus Austrian economics. Obviously, John is a big proponent of the Austrian school. I was a Keynesian guy. It's just what I was taught in school. And I kind of, I still lean that way to some extent because it is what it is. It is what we have. And I want to understand the Keynesian system because if I can understand how the government's going to play their chips, I think that gives you a competitive advantage. Is it the right economic system to run a country? I personally think not. I actually do like more of the Austrian school, which says let the markets do what they do. Now, let's be honest. If we did not have Keynesian economic policy, there's no way on earth our chart would look like this right now, right? Here's their chart of the S&P 500. We would not have had this gigantic, big, blue up move. Right? We probably would have had a significant sell-off that went much, much, much deeper than this if we didn't have all the stimulus and everything in place. So I think it's interesting to look at. Obviously, we can have our preferences. Maybe you're a Marxist and you think total government control, or you go into Keynesian, which is some intervention, or you go to the Chicago, which says a little bit of intervention, or Austrian, which says hands off everything, let the free markets do it and dictate what prices should be. Let supply and demand be determined by the buyers and sellers and manufacturers and producers of items and services. And to me, that is the right way to go. But I doubt we'll see it in our lifetime. And it was kind of interesting to hear John. He's right. I don't know of any PhD programs right now that are doing PhD in Austrian economics. And of course, if you go work for the Fed, they want a PhD. Oh, sorry, you can't come in here because you have no PhD, and there isn't one for Austrian. So interesting. All right, let me real quickly go and wrap things up. I am sweating like an animal in here. Here is our economic calendar for tomorrow. There are some earnings, but none of them are really that important, so I just kind of skipped over that. If you look down this list, you do have a very important announcement happening at 6:10 a.m. Dun, 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 dun. Jerome Powell will be speaking. That's coming shortly after the ECB press conference. And as you notice at the very top there, right now the ECB is expecting to raise rates by 75 basis points. So they've just started to get that ball moving over in Europe. Previous meeting there was 50 basis point increase. This one's expected to be 75. I'm curious to see what they say at the ECB press conference about rates going forward. And then Jerome Powell will probably talk a little bit about what the ECB has done in his speech. So that'll be a good one. You also have natural gas and crude oil inventories coming out tomorrow. And if you've been watching some of these commodity charts, they have certainly had some wild swings. Here's the past few days of natural gas. Actually, not a few days. This is the past few months of natural gas. Down from almost $10 all the way down to right about $7.75 over the past 12 trading sessions. And then we can look at crude oil, which I had way up here at the top. Here's my crude oil, which right now down 5.69% on the day. What's noteworthy about this, guys, is we broke those lows. So now it's about seeking out a floor. And I was kind of joking the other day. I said, well, 66 becomes a really strong demand zone way down here, 65. it's on the table now. It sounds kind of strange to hear, but yeah, look at this trend. You go back to this trend from June, lower highs, lower lows. We had one little glimmer of hope here as we broke some most recent highs, but now we're breaking lows again. So the trend is your friend to the bend at the end in crude oil, and that trend is to the south side. Stay short on oil. Most of the indexes had a nice little rebound today. You saw the NASDAQ, S&P, Russell, and the Dow all post positive numbers. The only real negative thing out there was crude oil. Bitcoin up 1.5%. And the leader for the indexes was the Russell, 2.12% to the upside. And there it is. All right, last one I want to show just before we bail. John was talking about interest rates. There is your 10-year, which is hesitating right near those highs. So all in all, a pretty darn good picture. You know what, Margaret? I actually went and looked at a quiet fan. I think I have to just go get one today because I'm dying over here. It's just way too hot. I have a fan, but I'm afraid it's going to be so loud on this stream that I just don't want to use it. So I'll go get some silent one. But you can see the sweat building up over here. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for me. I was supposed to have Larry Jacobson on the show tomorrow. That's not going to happen. Larry had something come up, but he will be on Friday's show. So if you have something you want me to discuss with Larry, or just tomorrow's show where I can do it all by myself, you guys drive the shows here. Lately, I've been kind of going off of your questions. So the best thing to do is put those comments down below the YouTube video. Type in your questions there. I will get that answered on Thursday's show, as I have no guests, so I'll be all alone in studio or in my sweaty upstairs office for tomorrow. And then Thursday, we'll have Larry Jacobson on the program. That's it. Yeah, I'm working on the AC, Lisa. I'm working on that. By the time I get my AC fixed, it'll be 65 degrees outside and perfect. So Larry doesn't drink, so unfortunately, no whiskey with Larry. Maybe tomorrow, Alan, I will turn on the phone, on that fan if I don't find a silent one tonight. But that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed seeing John. It has been a long time coming since I've had him on the program, so it's always great to see my good old friend there. Hope you guys do very, very well tomorrow in these markets, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.